Voices from the Mausoleum is brought to you by the You Run Podcast Network and yourunpodcast.com.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to an episode of 5 Influential Horror, a series where I talk to all kinds of horror fans about their 5 most influential horror movies and why they picked them. Today, for surprisingly, as long as we've been interacting for the very first time on the channel, is Elford Alley. How are you?
Happy to be here. Doing good.
Yeah, happy to finally do something with you. Yeah, I'm stoked. Yeah. We've been following each other for several years. There was like a time where I felt like you won all of my giveaways. It happened like back to back.
Yeah, I think I have a sticker on this laptop that I'm using, and I have like a few other things. I think I have a keychain, baseball cap.
Yeah. So it's nice to finally get to chat like a little more face to face anyway. Yeah. Electronically so, but still cool. So if you're not familiar with who Elford is, he is a horror writer, author of a horror novel that I very, very much enjoyed called Apartment 239. You've also done a children's book called A Cemetery Stroll, which I really need to grab because my son is very slowly starting to get into spooky stuff. Nice. And I feel like it's something we definitely need. You also, not that long ago, it feels like it wasn't that long ago, put out the sequel to Apartment 239, which is High Strangeness. Mm-hmm. And just more recently, you've been doing author interviews and chats and conversations on YouTube for the Alley Report, which is part of the Zervis department. Yeah. Is that right? Okay. Mm-hmm. I would love to chat a little bit about kind of what you have coming down the pipelines. Like, I love what you're doing on the YouTube stuff. I've been catching up. I've seen 3 of the episodes. They're super fun. I'm loving those conversations. But yeah, just want to give you some time to kind of talk about the stuff that you're working on, what you have coming up.
Yeah. Well, the interviews I have a bunch more scheduled. The hard part has been like, there's some that like WB Zervis is like, I've talked to this guy, this person. And there's some that I've contacted, but like my list of who I want to talk to is like 75 people long at this point. So like I'm already like I booked myself up through August.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
But that's been fun. Like I was really nervous the first one I did because I have like one of my traumatic thing for these interviews is I did my first podcast like in 2019, and they asked me a question and my mind just like left me, and I was just like, what do I do for like 30 seconds? It was horrifying. And so every time I do an interview, that's all I remember is like, hey, remember moment 5 years ago? Like, but it's been really fun. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. They're really great. I mean, and we're both a part of the indie community, but you, as well as, most people that I surround myself, you're a huge supporter of the indie community. I mean, if you look at your feeds, the things that you're engaging, you're constantly trying to boost the community and help, get some visibility on stuff. And I love to see it. And the interview thing is such a fun way to get to talk to people about horror stuff in general, especially in this community. So I think it's cool that you get to do that.
Yeah, I've been loving it.
Yeah. I'm going to put all of Elford's like social media links, the YouTube stuff, everything that you need to find him and his books in the description for this episode, so you can find it pretty easily. So today we're here to talk about your 5 most influential horror movies, though, and you seem to come up with these relatively quickly, so I'm kind of excited to get to them and kind of hear your thoughts on them. And we'll start with your first one, which is The Fly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one, huge. I saw that when I was 6. I think that's why it hit me so hard. Well, it was like my grandmother at the time had cable, and I was just over there, and nobody was like, paying attention to me, so I just watched whatever I wanted on there. I saw a lot of movies I shouldn't have seen at a young age, but but like The Fly, I just remember it was that it didn't terrify me or scare me. It just like broke my heart. Like viscerally, the part where he like grabs, spoilers for a movie from 1986, but like the part where he like, grabs the barrel of the gun and puts it to his head, and like she's like sobbing and she has to kill him. Like that, like I think I've always liked, little emotional depth, little heartbreak with my monsters. I think it goes back to that, and also like around that same time, I started watching the Universal horror movies with my dad, and it's the same thing. Like the movies are more sad than anything. They're more tragic than anything. Like we always feel for the monsters. And I feel like The Fly was like, you can have something horrifying and gross and weird, and it can still just break your heart, which is just something Cronenberg does better than anybody. But that was one that was really big. And the sequel's not bad. The Fly 2 is not bad.
It's not bad. No, and it's so funny because most people, obviously, when they talk about this movie, they talk about the body horror, they talk about, that kind of stuff. But you're right. It's a very emotional story. And I think like it was, as somebody, when I was growing up on horror, I really just, even into like my adulthood, I never really thought I was really that into gore. I tended to kind of stay away from it. But when I think about like, because I didn't see this until I was much older, like this was something I was introduced to probably in my mid 20s. So it's been a while, but, and I remember leaving it feeling the same things. I walked away from it thinking about the emotions and the story. And it was like, okay, you can have all of this stuff going on and it can still make you feel something. It doesn't have to be just this one thing or the other. Like it mixes those two things together really well for, a very emotional ending to a film for sure. Yeah, I totally agree. 6 though?
I had cable. I'll also watch at the same time Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which also is the most heartbreaking ending ever. So it's just like, I don't know where Mama was when I was like experiencing these traumatic, like, what was she up to? I don't know.
Oh no. Yeah, that is a lot to process at that age because my introduction to horror, I had to have been about 4 because I remember it, but it's very like cloudy, and that was Poltergeist, but I don't think that compares to this at all. Like I don't know that 6-year-old me could have handled a film like The Fly. That's a lot.
Yeah, I don't made me who I am today.
No, it's a great film. It's funny because I've been doing these influential conversations for over 2 years, like 2.5-ish years or something like that. And it wasn't until recently that this one ever even made a list. And I've always thought that it would be one that I just, people would constantly want to talk about because it's a very impactful film. A lot of people talk about it in terms of things that they look for in horror. And so I was really surprised that it took as long as it did to even show up. Because it's a super it leaves a mark after you've seen it 1 or 2 times. Doesn't matter how many times you've seen it. You walk away feeling the same way, I think, every time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So your second one, Psycho. I didn't say the background of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just love that movie. I don't know, maybe I was middle school and I just realized I'd never seen any Alfred Hitchcock, and I rented Psycho, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I didn't know anything about the twist. I didn't know anything about the surprise ending, so it totally caught me. And after that, I got rented Psycho 2, Psycho 3, Psycho 4, because all the sequels are good in their own way.
Yeah.
Like two's almost as good as the first one. 3 is like this gothic masterpiece. Four's got some moments.
Yeah, I've only seen the first one. Never seen the others.
At least 2 and 3. And 3's directed by Anthony Perkins.
Okay.
And so I think it's like it's this over the top, dramatic. It opens with like this nun at the top of a tower screaming, "God is dead!" Like that's like the level he has of like.
Okay. Drama. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I just loved everything about it. It's a movie that I still watch at least like once a year. I love it. I was so excited that I got to watch it with my oldest. Like she was old enough. I was like, all right, watch Psycho. And I don't know if she had if it affected her the same way, but
Sure.
I just, every time I watch it, I'm in awe of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely one of the biggest twist endings, especially for its time when this came out. I mean, we've had a bunch of crazy twists in the genre of horror since then, but yeah, this is one of like the original, like, oh my God, like the ending, just the shock value of it. Were you a fan of the show? Did you like Bates Motel, being, that you resonate with this film so much?
Yeah, I did like it. And I like that they made a lot of choices to make it, to purposely veer away from what you expected. It's like they knew if you're watching this, you're fans of the movie, and they also always had these red herrings.
That's true.
And also like I can't think of his name, who plays Norman in that one. Like the strength of him and Anthony Perkins was making Norman likable. Like you just liked him. you felt bad for him.
You did feel bad for him, yeah.
Like, I read, in reading the book, like the book's great too, but the author, like Robert Bloch, really wants it to be like he's an actual serial killer. So he's very misogynistic. He's got all these, you don't like him. You don't care for it.
It's different.
You're in his head, you're watching him, but you don't care for him. And in Psycho, like it's like, he's such a nice guy. And that's a running theme through all the sequels, is that people get close to him and people love him and he loves them too, but he's just so thoroughly broken. That's the tragedy of Norman Bates. It's like, you can't ever fix him. He's completely broken. And even if he comes close, you can't totally fix him.
Yeah. I mean, because in the first one, he's like very charismatic in ways, like a little off, I think, because I think, like, at least by the time I saw Psycho for the first time, I didn't necessarily know the ending, or I didn't know the twist per se, but I knew there was like something to him as far as like the bad of the story, right? So I was always paying attention to those things when I finally did get around to watching it for the first time. But he is charismatic, he's clean, he's sharp looking, as far as like, there's not a lot of like very like super over the top red flags about who he is and how he interacts with people. And it does exactly what you said. Like you feel bad for him. You almost want him to not to be like the good person of the story, the hero of the story. And then it's obviously that's not how it ends up being. But yeah, he's very charismatic, and it's hard not to. And the guy that played him in the first one did such a good job of towing the line between making you question yourself, but then you're like, no, like he's probably fine. Like there's a very weird line between the two that I think the actor who played him did a really good job of balancing the two things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So your third one, I don't think, based on what I've read, I would have suspected this one was going to be on this. This kind of surprised me, but that's A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, that one I have a long history, because this is one of those, did you ever, like, you're supposed to be in bed and your, parents are going to watch a scary movie or something, but then you snuck out behind the couch and you're watching it too.
Yeah.
And like, so this was that movie for me. Like, saw it at a young age, terrified me, freaked me out. I didn't want to sleep in my room. And at one point, my mom was like, what if you just imagine that Freddy Krueger's your friend? Like, what if he was your friend? What if he liked you and wouldn't want to hurt you? And that just did a thing where instantly I loved Freddy Krueger. Like, there's a picture of me when I'm really little, and I have the metal ends. When they used to have the metal things on pin caps, and I have them all over my fingers. And I have like an old fedora because I'm Freddy Krueger, and I'm like really little. And so like that made me. I think after that I loved horror movies, because I wanted to I just loved all the main bad guys. And my parents were very much like, I mean, this isn't real. You can't repeat the things you see and all that. I'm like, well, yeah,
sure.
Like, okay, go hog wild. So I saw all those, and even as I've gotten older, I appreciate that they're so imaginative. Like, I like all the Halloween sequels. I like the Friday the 13th sequels, but they can start to blur together. Like, especially Friday the 13th ones. Like, there are times where it's like, wait, which one is this one? And with Nightmare on Elm Street, even the worst movies, the ones you'd argue are the worst ones in the franchise, are so imaginative and fun and weird and take chances. Like number 5 makes no sense. You can't make that plot make sense. It's more convoluted than Frozen 2. It's a mess. But it's still fun to watch. Like, you just love it. And it adds, it always adds so much to the lore. And I mean, even Freddy's Dead, for all of its, going too far into the comedy arena, it still has some pretty cool moments. So
it does. Yeah.
It's just a series I've loved more and more as I've gotten older.
Yeah. And so your parents kind of nurtured the love of horror. They didn't even after this, like they didn't try to prevent it. They were just like, okay, as long as you know that reality from fiction.
Yeah. So that's and then a lot of times, like, just as parents, I feel like they got fooled, because when I was really little, I loved Gremlins. So Gremlins, weird green monster on the cover, pretty kid appropriate. So then they go to the video store and they see Ghoulies and Critters, and they're like, it looks just like Gremlins. It's probably Gremlins. And so then at that point, it's almost like, well, the damage has been done. Like, what can we do now? He's seen the giant critter ball roll over the people and turn into skeletons.
So good. I love Critters. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that happened. And then it was kind of like, well, he seems to like it. Like, he's creative, because they were always like, I had the dinosaur attacks cards, and I got in trouble for drawing them at school, and they would just be like, "Look, you can't. Some people just aren't going to get you, and you just gotta like know your audience." And they've always been supportive, and
Aw, that's really good though, because I feel like, my sister was my drug dealer when it came to horror. I would go spend, she was much older than me, so I would go spend like weekends at her house, and we would always go to the movie store, and we would get movies, and it was always horror, and she was happy to take me to see that stuff, even in theaters, as I got a little bit older, and was really the one that kind of like, my dad did more of the, like, I did grow up on like the original, the Universal Monsters, Planet of the Apes, sci-fi horror, like, I mean, anything in that realm, my dad was very into, but even some of the cheesier stuff, and, but my parents were very weird about what I could or couldn't watch or listen to, or, and it never like, but then there would be moments where I have this really fun picture of me on Halloween when I was probably, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years old, where I was like gory vampired out. Like they had like done like my mom made my cape out of a trash bag. This was the 90s. And so, like, and it was like all out, but then it was like, okay, but you can't watch Child's Play, or you can't like, it was a very weird, push and pull. So I've just kind of like, as my own parenting, it's like, are you interested in this? And then we discuss, is this scary? Is this too much? And then some things I just make those decisions, like nothing with crazy language, or because my son's only 6. And, but like shark movies, depending on the ones, like he loves those, like the PG-13 shark movies. He loves Jaws. Huge fan of Gremlins, like loves Gremlins. And, I tried to show him Imaginary because I thought he would think the bear was cool. Yeah. And he was a little bored with it because there's too many human parts. He just wants the monster bear. But it's just been more about a conversation of like, how is this making you feel? Do we need to revisit? Is it too much? And it's been just trying to allow him the freedom that I wasn't allowed when I was a kid, to watch and get into that kind of stuff. So it's great that you had parents that were like, I guess, go for it.
And then, like, as a parent, I get that push and pull where it seems like, wait, why this and not this? And there's always a feeling of like, wait, is this one too far? Because you never know. Like, my oldest is obsessed with horror movies, and I think she got her start with a kid brought an iPad, his iPad in class in first grade, and showed her the scene of It, the new one where George gets his arm ripped off. That freaked her out. So I was just like, okay, I got an easy fix for this. I'll show her behind the scenes footage. Like, it's not a real clown, it's a dude in a costume.
So, sure.
That's and like I saw some footage of him, like, high-fiving the kids, like, see, he's just an actor. And like that didn't work. Freaked her out even more.
Oh no.
Because to her it was like, he's real. I'm like, no, it's a dude in makeup. That's what I'm trying to get across here. And but then as she got older, like and it started with like one time we were watching, it was Picard, where a Romulan gets blown up with a phaser. And she was like right behind the couch, and I hear her go and like, oh, well, okay, well, I'm going to listen. And so, like, I think that kind of started after that. She wanted to see scary things. And now her thing is found footage. Like, she loves found footage.
Huge found footage fan over here. So I love that. That's awesome. I probably couldn't convince my kid. He's too young to get into found footage, but that's cool. Now, is there like a favorite found footage? Is it just the subgenre as a whole? Or
she watched Hell House LLC.
Okay.
And loved it. Like, that's anytime her friends come over, they're going to watch. If they haven't seen Hell House, she's going to make them watch it. She's watched the first 3, and then she wanted to watch other ones. And I gave her a list, and we watched Savage Land, but I think that's the only way we branched out yet, which amazing movie.
So great. That's in my top 10 found footage movies. It's so good.
Oh, yeah.
I literally just sat in like depression after that film was over. I felt so many things when it was over. Is so well done, and a great example of what you can do with not very much. Like, I just think it's so well done. So that's awesome.
So much of that is blurry, out of focus pictures that just make your hair stand on end. Like,
you're so unsettled, and that scene from the school broke me.
No, it's horrifying. It's like,
and obviously it's meant to, right? So it's effective, it works, but it's like, oh my God. And then some of the like political opinions and like, the climate, because it came out like 2018, but still, like, that wasn't that long ago, and it's very relevant. So it's so good. No, I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, we've only done the monster-y type thing, shark movies.
Yeah.
My son is obsessed with Crawl. He loved that movie.
That's a good movie.
It's a great movie. I love it too, but we watched it on repeat. It was streaming on Paramount or something. And we watched it on repeat for like 2 weeks. It's all we watched. And then he was the same way with what's the other? Oh, Five Nights at Freddy's. Loves Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh yeah, I've seen that movie so many times.
Yeah, I probably know it line for line. He actually just got one of the sets of comics for his birthday, because I think he won't really care about the chapter books because there's no pictures, but this he can still see the animatronics,
Yeah.
and he's really into it. So no, I think that's awesome. Yeah, I'm all for supporting the found footage subgenre. That's my favorite one. So that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I think like Nightmare on Elm Street, kind of like I think you made a really valid point with this one, because even though Nightmare on Elm Street is not one of my favorite franchises, I definitely have to agree that it is much easier to separate them as films than it is in some of those other ones, especially like the Halloween movies. For me, I actually haven't seen all the Friday the 13th because it's just not really my jam. But I just watched all of the Nightmare on Elm Streets for the very first time last summer. And even though they were not all my favorite thing, I can tell you which one is which. And I think that's a really, really good point about how creative and different they are, no matter what side of the scale you put them on, good, bad, it doesn't matter. They're super memorable, and it's an influential film to the genre, I think, as well as an influential film for people who love horror, because so many things have come from that, and I think it's influenced a lot of things in the filmmaking side of things as well. So it's just endlessly fun to talk about that film and the impacts it's had. What did you think of the remake?
I'll be honest, I haven't seen it.
No? Okay.
It's one of those, I love the series so much, and I kept hearing so many bad things.
Yeah.
Because when they did the reboot of Friday the 13th, everyone was like, it's a Friday the 13th movie. It's and I watched it, I was like, it is. And then I just kept hearing everyone just be like, it's one of those, you have all this CGI and all these things you can do with dreams and the concept of dreams, and it just sounded like they just did the laziest version possible.
Yeah, it's not imaginative. I would agree with those comments. I think the other problem was some of the writing. I think that Jackie, the guy that plays Freddy, I think was not a bad Freddy. I think he just wasn't given the most things to be successful. I think he did the best with what he was given, and that's about where that falls, because I actually liked it, but again, not super connected to the originals. And I think that matters.
Like he was a good Freddy. Like clips I've seen, he seemed like he was really leaning into the scarier Freddy, which I'm fine with. I mean, New Nightmare is one of my favorites, and that just gets rid of funny Freddy altogether.
Yeah, he definitely leans in. He's got some one-liners in this that gave me chills. Like the things he says, you're just like, it wasn't a lot of the first Freddy, it takes forever. Like there's a lot of stuff that happens before you even meet Freddy in the first, like really get into like that part of the story. But then, like you said, it leans more into the comical side. And this was very much we want to make this character scary again. I just think some of the other stuff around it wasn't done that great, but I do, he definitely says some stuff though that's like, ugh. Like it
makes me think I should give this a watch, like to see it. Like I was like,
yeah, okay. Maybe it's like
knowing it won't be as good, but still to see his Freddy,
just to give it a shot and see. Yeah, and I think, maybe if it's like streaming, right? So like maybe don't rent it, but like just in case. But like if it's streaming or somebody happens to have a copy or something, I think I actually do own that one on physical, which is kind of a big deal because I'm not really that into physical media. And yeah, it's definitely not going to meet, I think, anyone's standard for a Nightmare on Elm Street film, but I think there's some good things in it too. So maybe, if you give it a shot, I'd be curious to know what you thought. You'd have to circle back and let me know.
Right. I'm gonna give it a shot. I'll let you know.
Yeah, for sure. And this next one, I am so excited to talk about. This one I've never gotten to talk about this film in depth for any reason on the channel at all in 3 years. And so I'm so excited that this was on your list, and that's Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, this is like so many of my movies are like I saw it at a young age. I saw it at a formative age. This is when I saw I was already an adult, but it just blew my mind. Like I saw it, like I've been wanting to see it because I'd seen everything of Guillermo del Toro's up to that point and was a huge fan. So I was like, all right, this is coming out. And like I remember seeing it hit other cities, and I was living in Oklahoma, and finally it came to Oklahoma City. I think I saw it in theaters 5 or 6 times. I kept taking people, like, you know,
yeah.
like my wife and I were dating at the time, so we went and saw it. And it was like, well, we got to get so and so. We got to get so and so. And then every time I was like, well, I want to watch it too. So I don't have the DVD version because one of her students was like, that she teaches high school, and her students was like, I've been wanting to see this one movie, and it's Pan's Labyrinth, and she was like, I have it. You got to watch it. So like we lent it to them because so I had to rebuy it. It's like that. When you have a book you buy over and over again because you keep giving it away. Like
you keep giving it away, yeah.
I keep buying Pan's Labyrinth because I keep giving it to people because it's like it's brilliant and you have to see it.
Yeah. I got this movie is a masterpiece to me. I think it's beautifully told. I think it looks incredible. It is one of only, I think, 2, maybe 3 movies where there was a scene that I legitimately had to look away. The beer bottle scene was so much for me because they did such a great job making that stuff feel real. Like that was really happening. And I was so angry about it happening. And I was so invested that every single time it comes up, when I rewatch it, I skip it. I can't watch it. Like it just upsets me. I have again, it's in boxes somewhere, but I have a novelization of it that has like this beautiful teal cover with like unique art in it. I'm like such a fan of it. And I worship Doug Jones, who plays the Pale Man and the Fawn in this. I mean, he's brilliant. He plays, but the Pale Man is one of the scariest creatures I have ever seen in film. So good. I love this movie. I love that this is on your list.
and Doug Jones is just one of those people that like, he's never just a guy in a suit, and he's never like the same thing. Like anytime he's a character, especially with Guillermo del Toro, who like knows monsters, who like lets him do that, lets him be more than just a guy in a suit. Like there's always just a character to him. I don't know, like that he plays multiple monsters in suits, and they're so different, and there's so much to them, and so much said and unsaid about them. Like, just
it's weird. Much. And it's crazy because as the Pale Man, I mean, the Fawn talks a decent amount, not tons and tons and tons of conversation, but he does talk a lot to Ophelia, but the Pale Man doesn't say anything, and he doesn't need to. Like every like twitch, motion, shift, everything is just, you feel it like as if it were words. Like it's so good.
The first time like he's at the table and his hands like do that jerk and like those nails
on
the table. He's like and he's awake, and you're just like, because like there's nothing good, and it just builds, like, and then he's got to put the eyes in his hands, and he's got to
do the whole reveal of that, and he is a G. I love him so much. Like if I could interview anyone considered famous, it's him. Like anyone out of anyone in the world, 100%. He's so down to earth in interviews. And I love like listening to him talk about like how he got started and stuff like this. Cause his start, you may know this if you're a Doug Jones fan. But for those of you listening who don't know, that weird ass moon thing that McDonald's used to have as their logos, like a moon with a face.
That. Yes, he was that.
That was his introduction to Hollywood. That was the first thing he ever did. He was super
in horror, arguably.
Yes, in horror. Yes. And then he says, like, when he talks about it, he's so funny because when he talks about it, he's like, yeah, so then I just got this reputation as really tall, skinny guy that will be uncomfortable for the sake of a film or a commercial. And that's like been his career. And it's so great. He's fantastic. I love him. Yeah.
That's why I loved in Hellboy 2 when he finally got to be the voice too. Like he
yes. That's a good point. I didn't even think of it. Yes. Yeah. He gets to play, like not obviously Abe twice, but he plays, in 2 different films, but he plays that aquatic creature because he's also the monster in
Shape of
Water. Yeah. And so, which is beautiful, but it's another one where, like, to your point where you're talking about like what he's able to bring, there's like, you don't believe that that's a human being. Like there is just something, oh God, I could talk about, he's so great. Like in this film, anything dark fairy tale-y is kind of like right up my alley, but the acting in this was so good. Like it just was one of those films where after I watched it, and I don't do this super often because I don't revisit things unless they become like for real favorites. Yeah. But after I watched it for the first time, I immediately started a second watch. I was just so in love with this film.
and also, spoilers for this movie. In the end, like whenever I think about the movie, I'm like, what happened to Ophelia? It's like,
yeah,
well, she died, and that was a fantasy in her dying moments that she was reunited. But every time I watch the movie, I'm like, she went to the fairyland, damn it!
she got to go.
She deserved it, and she got it, and that's what happened. Like,
I can't
every time I
stomach
watch
the bleak.
it, I'm like,
No, I always the same way, because I think it's left like that to give you that little bit of hope, even though I think it's very, like, you can very easily, I think, argue either side of it, but I definitely do not have it in me after everything she went through to not let her have that happy ending. I just cannot do it. I'm like, no, like, she gets to be with her family again, and she doesn't have to live in this shitty world, and like, she gets to be happy.
She leave fascism behind. Like,
God, yeah, it's some of that stuff is so brutal. Like the captain, oh my God. Like I hate him almost as much as I hate that lady from and I don't know her name because I'm not like a super big Harry Potter person, but the lady in pink from Harry Potter. Yeah. He's up there with her, and she's pretty bad. Like he's so awful, and I just God, he played that role.
They're both a real evil. Like,
real
people like
evil.
That.
Yeah.
There are men in your life, if they had just a tiny bit of power, would be the captain. And you've met women like that who are just cruel beyond measure. Like, people like that. Like,
they're real. They exist in today. Like, yeah. And it's Pan's Labyrinth is one of my favorite movies. And it's one of the ones that I feel like, I know people who kind of live in the horror world are familiar with it, but there are people I know that I've met over years that like horror enough had never even heard of this film. And so it's always one, like, when someone's like asking for a recommendation, that's honest to God where I start. I'm like, well, have you seen Pan's Labyrinth? And if the answer is yes, I'll come up with something. If it's no, it's like, stop everything that you're doing and remedy that. Like, go watch it. If you have to rent it, you will not regret it. Like, it's just, I'm that confident that everyone who watches this movie will love it. It's so good.
Yeah, I would be willing to go door to door and just be like, have you heard the good news of Pan's Labyrinth? Like,
have pamphlets and everything, stickers, bumper stickers. Yeah, no, it's so good. So I'm so glad it was on your list, because again, I have not had an opportunity yet that's come up where I could just talk about that film. I think I've done it maybe in like a top list or something, like a short video. But yeah, it's such a great film. If you're watching this, you've not seen Pan's Labyrinth, please go watch it. Yes. Nothing is ruined by us talking about it. I promise you. Like, go see it. It's
like, there's so much more to it than we're saying. Like, I don't just
so much. God, it's beautifully done. And it's aged really well too, which I feel is important to mention, because it's not a new movie. It's been out for a while, and it's but it looks, to me at least, maybe I'm just biased because I love it so much, looks just as good to me now with the effects and everything as it did back then, because it's a mix of the two. It's practical, and then there's some stuff done post-edit, but it looks great.
So. Yeah, reserving CGI for what you just truly can't do practical. I feel like it's that's what makes a movie last. Like, it doesn't age as horribly. Like, that's why 100%. Jurassic Park still looks good.
Oh my God, for sure. Yeah. Practical always ages way better than CGI stuff does. And so, and of course, with it being Del Toro, it's mostly going to be practical anyway. That's just his wheelhouse with monsters and stuff, but it's worth the watch. It's so good. Go, like, stop everything you're doing and watch it. It's so good. And then this last one is another one, actually, that has never been on the channel before, but was one of my earliest watches of horror movie. And that's Pumpkinhead.
Oh, I love this movie so much. Just everything about it. Like growing up, my grandmother would tell stories about her family that came from, Appalachia, and like in the weird supernatural stories and things like that. So like watching Pumpkinhead is like, oh, like this is the place she's talked about. This is that place. And just I love the folklore. I love the kids singing the rhyme. I love this is a thing that's existed here for centuries, and that you don't know much about it. Like, as much as anybody else does, which is not much. And you don't really understand how it works until the very end. But like that witch woman, a version of her has been in at least 4 or 5 things I've written because I just love her so much.
Yeah.
Like, and like the monster, like Stan Winston getting to show off, and he's like, it's like everything he's worked on combined. Like, yeah.
This one actually, so I saw the first like this was my one of my like earlier ones. I probably saw this when I was under the age of 10. I probably was like 7 or 8, and this movie scared the hell out of me. Like I was so scared of this design of a monster, like the way he looks, the way he moves, the reactions of people obviously when they see him and he's scary. Like I was like it was very scary. Like, I think this is one of few films, especially when I was younger, that it took me like a while to finish because it really did scare me. Like, this was one where I think I told my sister, I was like, I gotta take a break. Like, I can't, this is too much. And probably not in those words because I was very young. It was probably like, I probably lied and pretended I wanted to go do something else because it was too much. But yeah, no, this movie, when I first saw this, scared me, like legitimately scared me. It's so good and fun. It's a fun movie too. It's really just a weird mix of feelings when you watch it.
And just, you know, the way like the way the monster alters as the movie goes. Like initially, it's a very like, you know, it's blank eyes, flat face, like it's just a monster. Then by the end, there's a part where it's basically taking Lance Hendrickson's face, and he just does that smile, like that smirk almost, and it's just it looks so good, like
so
that they were able to do that in the '80s, and just yeah, and like I've watched behind the scenes stuff about how, you know, they were talking about, you know, every good monster has a silhouette, and that was an obsession, was what's it look like just as a silhouette, so you recognize it instantly, and just seeing the work they put into it to have somebody in a suit for a 10-foot tall monster. And,
yeah. And is there a bunch of these? I've only seen the first one, I think, but there's others, right? There's like,
I
don't know how many.
4. Okay.
Is there 4? Okay.
There's 4. I've only seen the second sequel, part 2, and I did not care for it. It basically kind of it's like almost like a reboot. Really, what's weird is there are things that seem to imply the first movie happened, but then everything about the mythology of the monster is different, and where it came from and what it is. And it's just not as good. And like I a few years ago, I was like I'm gonna rewatch it because maybe I judged it too harshly, and it's like, no, I didn't judge it harsh enough. So like. So I haven't watched 3 and 4 because I know they filmed them back to back in like 2007-ish. But I don't know. After part 2, it's kind of like I love the first one so much. I don't want anything to sully it. Kind of like why I never watched the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. I was just like, I love this too much.
I get it. Yeah.
To walk into heartbreak.
Yeah, I have not seen any of the other ones, and I don't really feel like I ever hear anybody talk about the other ones. Like, I feel like enough people still bring up, you know, the original Pumpkinhead, like that comes up, but I don't feel like I ever hear anything about the other ones. I've just seen the posters. That's really the only reason I even know they exist, is because I've seen them in passing, but I've never committed to watch it. And I haven't seen Pumpkinhead in over a decade. I probably need to revisit it. I don't still love it.
It's as good as you remember. Like the first one, like I watched it recently. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
But you don't need to see. Like even the monster looks kind of lame, and they keep filming them like fully lit, and so you can just really tell he's just this rubber thing bouncing around.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Got floppy fingers instead of having the gnarled hands coming at you. It's just the floppy finger Muppet. Like,
yeah, and I don't know much about when it came out, if it was, you know, like well received. I mean, I know people, you know, really love it and talk about it now, but I don't know if it was well received. So maybe if it wasn't, maybe they had a lower budget for the second one. I have no idea. Was there a huge gap? Because
it was. I feel like there was a pretty significant gap between the two. And I know the first one, I feel like it was just kind of written off as a forgettable creature feature, even though like it's clearly not. It's clearly heads and tails above anything else coming out around its time. I mean, it's like, like with John Carpenter's movies, you know, they're usually like The Thing was panned as awful and a waste of time, and now people are like, this is a stone cold classic.
The best, yeah. I think that happens mostly to horror films. I feel like in general, like I feel like it just gets like the worst treatment. Like I always look at, like when I look at, I never care what people say, like review wise, I just watch whatever I want to watch anyway. But it's like kind of like, because I always pay attention to found footage specifically, I feel like it's that, and like monster movies are so mistreated in like a broader scale outside of horror fans. They're just not very well received. And it's like, I don't understand why y'all keep going to see them then. Just shut up and let the people who like them talk about them. It seems like it's immediately like it just automatically gets a lower rating or a low, you know, like it's weird. I'm gonna have to revisit Pumpkinhead. Do you know if it's streaming?
I don't know. I think it was on Prime at one point, but I feel like it's jumped since then. Like it's hard to tell. Like I've missed out on movies because I'm like, oh, it's on Hulu, and then it's like, oh, now it's somewhere else. It's like that's why I'm kind of going back to physical media, because it used to be I don't need to buy these movies because they're streaming everywhere, and now it's like, well, now they're locked behind this place or they're locked behind this place. So it's like, okay, I'll pirate it or buy the DVD. Like,
yeah, and you've got where they're changing movies too. So there's like now if you buy if you get Scream, oh God, is it 4? Is it 4? I think it's Scream 4. Now the newer version of Scream 4 that there's like one scene in particular where it's like I remembered it. I rewatched it right before I went to see 5. And I was like, I swear to God, that scene was so much worse than that. And so I was talking to somebody else about it, and they're like, oh yeah, no, it is. They changed it. And so now if you get it now, or if you watch it on a streaming anything now, it's a completely different scene. And so it's like, it's weird. They did the same thing to the Wolfman remake is another one where they changed scenes post after an initial release, it got changed. And so now if you see it, you see like a different version. And that doesn't happen if you get the initial, the physical releases, when they first come out. Yeah. So yeah, it's true. They're hard to find, and you're not finding them the way that you remember them because they're changing them, and there's nothing you can do about it. It sucks.
That's horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah. So The Fly, Psycho, Nightmare on Elm Street, Pan's Labyrinth, and Pumpkinhead. Really varied list too. And a few that have not been on here. I don't think Psycho's been on here either. So Psycho, Pan's Labyrinth, and Pumpkinhead. Nice. 3 first timers, I think, on the show, which is good. Always fun. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you again for making time to do this. This was fun getting to pick your brain, because I've read stuff from you, but I've never talked to you about not to this level. So this was cool. Yeah. So thank you for making time for that.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me on. It's a great time. Happy to be here.
Yeah, of course. Welcome back anytime. Yeah. I am I'm going to have to get the cemetery stroll or a cemetery stroll for my son. I think he'll probably really like that. That seems like a fun book.
I hope so.
Yeah. And you just posted recently about working on another children's book, right? Am I crazy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's going to be the sequel. It's got the same characters, and it's
Haunted Holiday. Okay.
So it's like I love the idea, Christmas ghost stories, and I usually get Valancourt does their Victorian ghost stories, and it's always read that kind of stuff. So I told Cemetery Gates, I was like, I want M.R. James for kids. So that was my goal with this.
I love that. Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, when I try to find stuff that's like the right level of spooky, but is still like a kid's. Sorry, can you see me again?
Oh yeah, I can see you now. Yeah, it was
my cat. I tried to prevent him very cautious, quietly, put my hand out so he wouldn't get on my Ethernet cable. And he still sat right on it and he yanked it out of my thing.
Every time, I have a Jack Russell Terrier napping just right there. And I'm waiting for it to go wrong. It's going to go wrong any second now.
I had a video recently where my Calico, who's not even an age appropriate to be trying to jump up high because she's a geriatric cat, she jumped up here, knocked my camera over, and then wouldn't stop coming and rubbing on my microphone. I was like, what has gotten into you guys? Y'all normally don't do stuff like this. Not up here anyway. Anyway, I digress. I'm going to have to make a voices from the Mausoleum Cat segment at this point. It's getting ridiculous. But yeah, when I'm trying to find age appropriate stuff that's still actually I kind of struggle with what to find, because a lot of it is almost too baby now that my son's a little bit older. But I showed him The Nurse from the Black Lagoon. I don't know if you ever read that, but it was put out by Scholastic. It's one of my favorites. And Kaylee Poe, I don't know if you ever read that one. That was one of my favorites growing up too. Mm-hmm. And so trying to find stuff like that can be difficult sometimes. So I'll have to grab the first one.
Because they have that, and there's another one that Cemetery Gates has called The Mayor of Halloween is Missing. And I feel like it's also in that age range.
Okay. I'll have to check that one out too. Yeah, because he's all about stuff like that right now. And I think it's he's trying to get into the Five Nights at Freddy's, but he's not quite there age wise. So we really just end up looking at the pictures in the comics because he doesn't really give a crap about the human parts at all. He's like, I don't care about this. I just want to see the animatronics. Yeah. So it's hard to find something that's of interest, but still kind of age appropriate. So yeah, I'll check that one out too. But yeah, all right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up this episode of Influential Horror. Once again, all the links needed to find all of the things, the YouTube videos with the for the Alley Report, which I do recommend checking out. They're really fun conversations. Some people I know I'm familiar with face wise, and some I don't know. So that's even cooler because then you find people to follow and so on and so forth, as well as your socials and where to find your books. All of that stuff will be in the description for this episode. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on this episode of Influential Horror. We hope you have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.